Um, Imagine you woke up tomorrow morning, stepped onto the scale in your bathroom, and realized you had gained 20 pounds overnight.
I mean, you would probably panic.
Right. You would immediately call a doctor. You'd just assume something was horribly wrong with your body.
Oh, absolutely.
But what if I told you that millions of well-intentioned, incredibly loving dog owners are doing the exact equivalent of this to their pets every single day, completely by accident?
Yeah, it's a profound cognitive blind spot that we all share, really, because we rely so heavily on visual heuristics, which are essentially just mental shortcuts.
Right.
So when we look at something tote bag sized, our human brains immediately categorize it as, simple or fragile or toy-like, and we inadvertently strip away its actual biological identity.
Welcome to today's deep dive. We are unpacking a genuinely fascinating transcript today from a show that focuses on canine health.
It's a really eye-opening one.
It really is.
Yeah.
And our mission today is to examine exactly how this visual glitch plays out right inside our own homes. Specifically, how the physical scale of small breed dogs causes us to completely misjudge their complex biological and psychological needs.
Because the source material provides a perfect case study in how our perception of scale distorts our understanding of reality. We see a tiny creature, and we construct this entirely false narrative about what that creature requires to thrive.
The source actually kicks off with a statistic that it stopped me in my tracks, and it really sets the stakes for this whole discussion.
The lifespan data.
Yes. When we talk about small breed dogs, we are talking about average lifespans of 15, 16, sometimes even 17 or more years. I mean, 17 years. That is high schooler.
And the implication of that timeline is what makes this so critical. A long lifespan means you have a very, very long runway for well-intentioned mistakes to accumulate. When an owner treats a small dog as an accessory, or maybe as an easy version of a pet simply because of their size, they're setting up a scenario where subtle, compounding errors in care happen over a decade and a half.
So we have this massive runway of 15 years. And according to our source, there are these persistent myths that essentially cause us to undercare for them.
Exactly.
I want to jump straight into the first big one, which is the idea that small dogs just don't need that much exercise. The classic assumption is that, because they have short little legs, just shuffling around a small apartment or maybe a quick walk to the end of the driveway is completely fulfilling for them.
And looking purely at the size of their stride makes that assumption feel really logical to a human, but it completely ignores the animal's evolutionary history.
How so?
Well, the physical size of the dog may have been shrunk by generations of human-driven selective breeding, but their internal wiring, their instinctive working drives, those are not touched at all.
That is so interesting because I always just look at a dachshund and think, oh, what a cute little sausage dog. I just assume they are built for lounging on a couch. But the source implies they weren't designed for that at all. What were these dogs actually engineered to do?
Okay, so dachshunds were quite literally engineered to navigate dark, cramped underground burrows and aggressively face off with badgers.
Wait, badgers?
Yes, animals known for being incredibly vicious. Meanwhile, terriers were bred to relentlessly hunt down vermin on farms, and beagles were developed to track complex scents for miles through dense brush.
Wow.
You look at a tiny terrier today and see a lapdog, but the internal software running inside that animal is still the software of a highly specialized, intense, high-stamina worker.
It makes me think of someone going out and buying a ridiculously expensive 6-speed manual Ferrari, but they live in a congested city and only ever drive it in bumper-to-bumper traffic.
That is a great analogy.
Right. If you never let that car shift out of first gear, the engine doesn't just get bored. It literally carbon fouls, the mechanics degrade, and the car breaks down.
And that mechanical failure analogy maps perfectly onto canine behavioral issues. If we look at the bigger picture of how a dog's brain functions, this explains the underlying mechanism behind so many bad behaviors in small breeds.
Okay, tell me more about that.
Well, the source highlights a specific activity called a sniff walk, where the owner lets the dog's nose dictate the pace of the walk rather than the human's need to quickly march around the block.
I've always wondered about that. Like, what is actually happening in their brain when they stop to sniff a single blade of grass for 3 minutes?
A huge portion of a canine's brain is dedicated purely to olfactory processing. Their sense of smell is their primary way of rendering the world.
So it's not just smelling dirt.
No, not at all. When they are on a sniff walk, they are essentially reading the neighborhood newspaper. They are decoding complex chemical messages about what other animals have been there, their health status, their stress levels.
Oh, wow.
Processing that much data is heavy cognitive puzzle solving. It requires intense mental energy.
So a slow 20-minute walk where they are constantly sniffing is actually more exhausting for them than running at a full sprint for 20 minutes.
Absolutely. Cognitive fatigue is often much more fulfilling for a working breed than pure physical exhaustion. When these dogs don't get those dedicated sniff walks or meaningful play sessions that mimic hunting or tracking, their unfulfilled biological drives have to go somewhere.
Which is where the bad behavior comes in.
Exactly. The energy redirects into systemic errors, excessive barking, severe separation anxiety, restlessness, or destroying your furniture.
And owners look at that destruction and think, my dog is naturally neurotic, or my dog is just difficult to train.
Right, they misinterpret understimulation as a personality flaw. The biologic reality is that the dog is an unemployed worker locked in a studio apartment, desperately trying to find an outlet for the job it was bred to do.
Okay, so if we are physically and mentally exhausting them correctly, that solves the energy problem. But that doesn't necessarily solve the environment problem.
No, it doesn't.
Because an exhausted tiny terrier is still a tiny terrier living in a world built for giant humans. Which brings us to the second major myth from the source text, the paradox of protection, or the idea that small dogs are inherently dangerously fragile.
And the psychology of protection is complex here because the instinct to protect them stems from a kernel of absolute truth regarding their physical stature.
Right. Let me play devil's advocate for a second here.
Sure.
If we look at the pure physics of their bodies, their bones genuinely are smaller and thinner. A drop from a high bed or an open car door is a legitimate bone-breaking fall risk.
It is.
So if I have a 10-pound dog and I'm walking through a crowded, chaotic farmer's market, aren't I just being a responsible, loving owner by scooping them up and carrying them over the crowd or carrying them up a steep flight of concrete stairs?
Protecting them from getting trampled in a dense crowd or preventing a dangerous high-impact jump is basic responsible ownership. The danger lies in the behavioral overcorrection. The myth isn't that they are small. The myth is that they must be treated like delicate glass ornaments in every single scenario. The source material details the severe psychological damage that occurs when an owner habitually carries their dog everywhere and shields them from completely normal, safe social interactions.
So by trying to protect their physical body, we are accidentally crushing their psychological development. How does that actually happen in the dog's mind?
Well, think about how any young mammal human or otherwise develops baseline confidence. It requires encountering novel situations, feeling a moment of uncertainty, assessing the environment, and then successfully navigating through it.
Right, learning you can handle things.
Exactly. When an owner carries a small dog everywhere in a bag or in their arms, they strip the animal of its agency to problem solve. They rob the dog of the opportunity to physically feel the ground, map its environment, and learn that it can survive the one on its own 4 feet.
And the source specifically calls out the result of this overprotection, a phenomenon known as small dog syndrome. People usually use that term as a joke, to describe a tiny dog barking aggressively at a huge dog, but the mechanics behind it are actually kind of tragic.
The tragedy is that the aggression is entirely fear-based.
Right.
Yes. When a dog meets another dog naturally on the ground, there is an intricate, silent dance of canine communication happening. They do sweeping curves, they assess body language, they smell each other, and they signal their intentions.
And what happens when the small dog is being carried during that interaction?
The entire communication system breaks down. When you carry your dog, you force them into an unnatural, elevated face-to-face confrontation with a bigger dog.
Oh, I never thought of that.
Yeah, to the larger dog on the ground, your elevated tiny dog physically resembles a dominant, challenging aggressor. And to your tiny dog, they feel physically trapped in your arms with absolutely zero avenues for retreat.
They can't run away.
Right. They cannot perform natural calming signals. They are terrified, so their only option is to preemptively bark and snap to create distance.
That makes so much sense.
Right.
They bark aggressively, not because they are brave, but because they have never been allowed to learn proper canine social cues.
They never learned how to be a dog. The crucial takeaway for anyone listening is that you must protect your small pet from genuine physical risks, but you absolutely must let them be real dogs in appropriate everyday ways.
Right, yeah.
Let them walk on safe trails, let them explore grass, let them figure out how to greet other balanced dogs on their own level.
So we overprotect them outside because we misunderstand their physical scale in relation to the world. But the source material points out something even more alarming.
Yeah, the internal health aspects.
Right. That exact same misunderstanding of scale makes us completely blind to two massive hidden health epidemics happening right under our noses, or rather literally inside their mouths and on their ribs.
The biological realities of being small become highly counterintuitive when we look at internal health. The human assumption is that a smaller animal means proportionally smaller, less severe health problems.
Which isn't true.
Not at all. In reality, a small physical scale actively amplifies certain systemic risks.
Let's look at the dental side of things, because the mechanics of this completely blew my mind. Vets actually see the most severe chronic dental disease in small breed dogs. Wait, I'm confused about this part. If a dog has a smaller head and a smaller mouth, shouldn't they just naturally have smaller teeth to match?
You would think so.
Why does a small mouth automatically mean severe dental crowding?
The explanation lies in the differing speeds of human-driven selective breeding versus natural evolution. Over the last few centuries, humans actively bred these dogs to have specific aesthetic features, like the pushed-in faces of pugs, or the very narrow, delicate snouts of toy poodles.
Okay.
We shrank the size of the jawbone at an incredibly accelerated, unnatural pace. However, natural evolution did not shrink the actual size of the teeth at that same rapid speed.
Oh, wow. So they have the teeth of a much larger dog crammed into a tiny, artificially shrunken jaw.
Exactly the issue. You take the standard canine dental formula and force it into a space that is 50% smaller. The teeth inevitably twist, overlap, and crowd together.
That sounds painful.
It is. And because they are packed so tightly, there are almost no natural cleaning surfaces between the teeth, where saliva and chewing friction would normally wipe away bacteria. It creates a perfect, tightly sealed environment for plaque and tartar to accumulate, harden, and thrive.
So the small mouth isn't just a physical trait. It is an active catalyst for disease. And the source makes a really important point about how owners misinterpret the warning signs. People just assume that horrible doggy breath is a given, especially with older, smaller dogs. They think it's just a funny quirk of the breed.
Persistent, significant bad breath is never a quirk. It is a glaring red flag of active, decaying dental disease. And the fallout from that plaque isn't just cosmetic. The bacteria under the gum line enters the bloodstream, creating systemic, low-grade inflammation that eventually damages the dog's kidneys, liver, and heart valves over time.
Which is terrifying because dogs are evolutionary masters at hiding pain. Showing vulnerability or chronic pain in the wild makes an animal a target for predators.
Right.
So a small dog could be living with a mouthful of severely infected, rotting teeth. But because they aren't whimpering or refusing their dinner, the human owner assumes everything is perfectly fine.
The survival instinct to hide pain overrides their need to signal for help. This is why owners have to be incredibly proactive rather than reactive.
But the hidden math of being small doesn't stop at their teeth. It applies heavily to their weight, too. And here is where we get back to that crazy visual from the beginning of the deep dive, because the math of canine weight gain is so incredibly unforgiving to the human eye.
The proportional impact of weight gain on a small skeletal frame is something our brains simply struggle to calculate intuitively.
The source gives the perfect mathematical breakdown. Imagine a 1-pound weight gain on a 10-pound dog. To a human, a single pound sounds like absolute nothing. It's the weight of a heavy sweater.
Barely noticeable.
But on a 10-pound dog, that 1 pound represents a 10% increase in their total body weight. If we contextualize that for an average adult human, it's the equivalent of waking up tomorrow morning having gained 15 or 20 pounds of pure fat overnight.
And the sudden strain on the body is immense, and the way they gain that weight highlights another failure of visual scale.
The treats.
Yes. An owner finishes a sandwich and tosses their tiny dog a small piece of cheese or a single crust of bread. To the human holding it, it looks like a microscopic morsel.
Right, just a tiny little bite.
But relative to the caloric needs of a 10-pound animal, that single piece of cheese might represent 30 or 40% of their entire daily caloric allowance.
It's the equivalent of a human eating 3 extra double cheeseburgers a day as a snack and then being shocked when their pants don't fit at the end of the week.
Exactly.
But the fallout isn't just about the dog looking a little chubby, is it?
The physiological consequences cascade quickly. Adipose tissue fat isn't just dead weight. It is biologically active tissue that constantly secretes inflammatory hormones.
So it's actively harming them.
Yes. So a tiny dog carrying an extra pound isn't just carrying a heavy backpack. Their entire body is in a constant state of low-grade inflammation. This leads directly to increased cardiovascular load and catastrophic stress on their tiny joints. It often exacerbates conditions like luxating patellas, where the kneecap constantly pops out of place.
And because they are so close to the ground, we don't even notice the pain it causes them.
Think about the geometry of how a dog walks. A massive Great Dane has a naturally long 3-foot stride. If that large dog develops joint pain, that stride visibly shortens, and a human can easily spot the limp from across the room.
Right, it's super obvious.
A tiny Yorkie, however, only has a 4-inch stride to begin with. If they lose 10% of their mobility due to joint pain, their stride shortens by less than half an inch. The human eye simply cannot process a mechanical change that small at a casual glance.
We literally cannot see them suffering. Which brings us to the ultimate overarching challenge of caring for these animals. When the decline in their health is that slow and visually imperceptible, how do you possibly track it over a 16-year lifespan?
It's incredibly difficult.
The source noted that if a small breed dog lives to be 16 and their senior years technically begin around age 8, they spend almost half of their entire existence as a senior citizen.
Which means managing a slow aging process over an 8-year senior window requires a vastly different, much more meticulous strategy than most people assume. You cannot rely on visual observation or casual memory.
No, human memory just isn't built to notice a tiny fraction of an inch change in a dog's stride over 5 years. The source actually highlights a specific tool called the VitalPet app to solve this exact blind spot.
It's a great concept.
Yeah, and it's low about diagnosing anything. You still need a vet for that, and more about giving the owner a tangible 15-year timeline of data. You log the vaccinations, the dental cleanings, the microscopic weight fluctuations. That way, when you walk into the clinic, you aren't just relying on your eyeballs. You have actual data to show the vet the hidden patterns.
Maintaining that long-term timeline is critical for catching kidney decline or vision loss before it becomes an emergency. If we connect all of these logistical details back to the broader emotional picture, the underlying theme of this entire source document is actively combating the myth that small dogs are somehow less serious pets than large working dogs.
That part of the transcript really struck a chord with me. The idea that a purse dog is a starter pet.
It is a pervasive and harmful cultural attitude. The reality is that a 12-pound Maltese and a 120-pound Rottweiler demand the exact same standard of attentive, proactive, dedicated care.
They really do.
The physical size of the animal has zero correlation with its biological complexity, its capacity to feel pain, or the depth of the human-animal bond it shares with its owner.
A 12-pound dog leaves just as massive of a hole in your heart when they are gone as a giant Mastiff does.
Exactly. To honor that bond, owners must consciously recognize that small dogs are not simply easier, low-maintenance versions of large dogs. They require an equal level of dedication and respect, just applied through a very different, highly specific lens.
Let's summarize all of this, because there is a massive amount of nuance to digest here. To truly care for a small breed dog, you have to actively train yourself to look past their physical size. You have to consciously override that visual glitch in your brain.
Spot on.
They aren't stuffed animals. They need real miles on their legs. They need complex olfactory puzzle solving to exhaust their ancient working drives. They need the physical agency to actually navigate the ground so they don't become anxious, reactive wrecks. And internally, they need meticulous, data-driven tracking of their dental health and their weight across an incredibly long 15-year lifespan.
Success really comes down to aligning our daily care routines with their true biological reality rather than our flawed visual assumptions.
So what does this all mean for you? If you own a small dog, or you have a friend or family member who does, recognizing and dismantling these myths isn't just about knowing some interesting canine trivia.
No, it's life-changing.
It is quite literally the difference between living with a constantly anxious, understimulated pet who is secretly hiding chronic joint and dental pain, and having a thriving, confident, deeply fulfilled companion by your side for well over a decade.
Adjusting our perspective fundamentally changes the quality of life for the animal relying on us.
It really does transform their whole world. And it leaves me thinking about that initial idea we started with, how alarmingly easy it is for our highly evolved human brains to be tricked by physical scale.
It is a powerful illusion.
We look at a tiny dog, we see something cute and diminutive, and we completely misjudge its fundamental complex needs. Which makes you wonder, if our brains can so easily misinterpret the deep biological realities of the animals living right inside our own homes, sleeping on our own couches every single night, what other traits in nature, or even in the human beings walking around us every day, are causing us to completely misinterpret someone's actual capabilities, their hidden struggles, or their true needs, simply because of how they look on the surface?